I go for refuge until I'm enlightened. To the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By my merits from giving and other perfections, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I am enlightened. To the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By my merits from giving and other perfections, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I am enlightened. To the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By my merits from giving and other perfections, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. There we are. I bow down to my perfect gurus. The essential meaning of the Victorious One's teachings, the path praised by all the holy Victorious Ones and their sons, the gateway of the fortunate ones desiring liberation. This I shall try to explain as much as I can. Those who are not attached to the pleasures of circling, who strive to make freedoms and endowments meaningful, who entrust themselves to the path pleasing the Victorious Ones, you fortunate ones, listen with a calm mind. Without the complete intention definitely to be free from circling, there is no way to pacify attachment, seeking pleasurable effects in the ocean of circling. Also, by craving for psychic existence, embodied beings are continuously bound. Therefore, at the very beginning, seek renunciation. Freedoms and endowments are difficult to find, and life has no time to spare. By gaining familiarity with this, attraction to the appearances of this life is reversed. By thinking over and over again that actions and their effects are unbetraying, and repeatedly contemplating the miseries of psychic existence. I thought it said mini-series for a moment. It doesn't say mini-series. The miseries of psychic existence. Attraction to the appearances of future lives is reversed. When by having trained in that way, there is no arising even for a second of attraction to the perfections of psychic existence, and all day and night the intention seeking liberation arises, then the thought of a renunciation has been generated. Even if renunciation has been developed, if it is not possessed by the mind of enlightenment, so if it's not combined with it, basically, it does not become the cause of the perfect bliss of unsurpassed enlightenment. Therefore, the wise generate the supreme mind of enlightenment. Swept away by the current of the four powerful rivers, tied by the tight bonds of karma so hard to undo, caught in the iron net of self-grasping, completely enveloped by the total darkness of ignorance, endlessly reborn in psychic existence, ceaselessly tormented by the three sufferings, thinking that all mothers are in such a condition, generate the supreme mind of enlightenment. In short, if like the mother whose cherished son has fallen into a pit of fire, and who experiences even 1 second of his suffering as an unbearable eternity, your reflection on the suffering of all mother sentient beings has made it impossible for you to bear their suffering for even 1 second, and the wish seeking enlightenment for their sake arises without effort, then you have realized the supreme precious mind of enlightenment. Without the wisdom realizing ultimate reality, even though you have generated renunciation and the mind of enlightenment, you cannot cut the root cause of circling. Therefore, attempt the method to realize dependent arising. One who sees the cause and effect of all phenomena of both cyclic existence and the state beyond sorrow as forever unbetraying, and for whom any object trusted in by the grasping mind has completely disappeared, has at that time entered the path pleasing the Buddhas. If the appearance that is unbetraying dependent relation is accepted separately from emptiness, as long as these two understandings are seen as separate, then one has still not realized the Buddha's intent. If these two realizations are happening simultaneously without alternation, and from merely seeing dependent relation as completely unbetraying, the definite ascertainment comes that completely destroys the way all objects are apprehended as truly existent. At that time, the analysis of the ultimate view is complete. Furthermore, appearance eliminates the extreme of existence, and emptiness eliminates the extreme of non-existence. If you realize how emptiness manifests in the manner of cause and effect, then you are not captivated by wrong notions holding extreme views. In this way, you realize exactly the vital points of the three principal aspects of the path. Resort to seeking solitude, generate the power of effort, and quickly accomplish your final goal, my child. Okay. So we have a little bit more to go in the text before we get to the to the next meditation topic. So really, the first one is all to do with the guru cultivating a healthy attitude towards the person who's guiding you on the path. Then after that, you have precious human rebirth. So that's coming up next, and that's in the three principal aspects of the path, when it says at the very beginning that line, I pay homage to my gurus, or something like that. It says. So that's if you sort of compare it to I don't know, anyway, if you sort of like trying to see how the three principal aspects of the path and the stage of the path fit together, so that line would be equivalent to this whole topic of how you relate to your spiritual guide, your virtuous friend, or friend in virtue. And then the next thing is the precious human rebirth, and that's so anyway, so it mentions it in order to be able to, besides other things that you might be able to say about the meditating on a precious human rebirth, the leisures and endowments, as they say. One thing, what it says in this thing that we've just been reciting is that if you meditate on how difficult it is to get this kind of precious human life that we have at the moment, then besides that, cultivate an awareness that life is really very short. I mean, anybody can see that somehow, like according to what do you call it, cosmological time, human life is, for sure, it's just over in a flash. And then besides that, it can seem like you have quite a lot of time. Even me, I get to 67, I think, well, probably, actually I'm not 67, 66, next birthday 67. So you think, well, probably not going to make it to 100, could possibly make it to 90, And then you start thinking, yeah, 30. Is that right? 17? Oh yeah, I was going to say, I thought it was going to be 13 years. No, it's 20. That's 23 years. You think that's quite a lot of time, but actually, throughout your life, you begin to see how time seems to go by quicker and quicker, right? And I'm sure all of us, sometimes we think to ourselves, where did all that time go? How did I get here? So it's going to be like that. The days kind of rush by into weeks, and the weeks rush by into months. Then the years go by, and then one day, if it doesn't really catch you by surprise, one day you're going to be thinking to yourself, wow, so my life's over. And in a way, it'll all be like last night's dream, just a memory. Might be a good memory, might be some bad memories. But then, yeah, I mean, if you don't have any kind of idea, any sort of sense that there is something after this life, that's one thing, But for somebody who thinks, yeah, so then it's not like this life is over and then that's it. There's more to come, kind of thing. So, so as far as the life that you've led, what you've done, in one way, all you're left with is memories. And then also, according to karma, you're left with the imprints of what you've done, plus during this life, good or bad, better or worse, plus a whole backlog from previous lives, and that you get to take with you. You don't get to take your friends, you don't get to take your credit cards, you don't get to take your body, you just get to take that one thing. So like Gizi Zupa said, that this kind of I find quite left quite an impression on me when I came across it. He said, when the time of death comes, what really counts is what you've been doing with your mind during this life, not so much the physical things, what you've been doing with your mind. And at least, you spend your life, if possible, being useful, at least not, making life more difficult for people than it already is. So you've been trying. That's pretty good. No need to regret then. Anyway, so that's what we'll be coming. That's what we'll be doing. That's what we'll be doing. And anyway, so actually, while we're about it, so talking about this precious opportunity and how it's going to come to an end eventually, and actually very soon. Very soon. So, if you want to die without regrets, then the best thing is bodhicitta. So we'll spend a few minutes trying to develop a sense of bodhicitta, that precious mind of bodhicitta. And one quite useful way. See, the thing is, bodhicitta is kind of like has no energy, no power without the compassion. And compassion means understanding the suffering of others and finding it unbearable. So you feel like, absolutely, you feel like you must do something. And I think it's true that what they say that only really is, that kind of attitude is only really going to arise in your mind if you have a good understanding of this, your own suffering situation. So that's why it's good to think about the suffering nature of psychoexistence first. So also, I think I skipped something. What I was trying to say was, it's meditating on meditating on how precious this life is and how it's going to be over so soon. That that helps you to not be distracted too, and sort of obsessed with short-term happiness and pleasure, which is going to, at the end of this life, is just going to be like life, last night's dream. Even if you do get those things, those worldly things, short-term pleasures and so on, even if you do get them, then it's just going to be like a dream. And besides that, there's, if you're not thinking of anything but just your own sort of like short-term pleasures and so on, then chances are you're not going to go about gaining them, procuring them in a way that's very skillful. So in other words, you won't have all that. It'll be just like last night's dream. But what you will have is all of the karma that you created. So thinking about precious human rebirth and death helps you to overcome that kind of attachment. So you're focused on something more useful for yourself and others. So anyhow, think a little bit about the suffering nature of psychic existence, and then think about how that's how it is also with all the sentient beings who are all one's mother and father and brother and sister and so on. And so try to develop compassion that finds their suffering unbearable, so you take responsibility, and then how you're going to honor that kind of commitment is by achieving enlightenment. So that's the purpose of us spending this time. It's the purpose of one's life, but also particularly this year, this month, this week, this day, and particularly this couple of hours, hour and a half or so we're spending together. So in this text, the middle-length Lamrim, we're on the section which takes up most of the book, which is about how the how you're guided along the path through the various practices and meditations. And with, so there, the first thing that's talked about is as I mentioned before, the way to relate to the virtuous friend. And then for a while now, it's been talking about, well, what do we have first of all? So in order to meditate on that, how to go about doing a meditation session, and then what to do during the break. And now this particular session is about meditation itself. So where we are is page 54. You got the book. So we've already got a bit into this section. It talks about the need to employ two kinds of practice. So it's talking about the two types of meditation, right? So the what do you want to call it? Do you prefer analytic meditation or checking meditation? Checking. Analytic. Okay. Oh, you like analytic meditation? Okay. All right. You're welcome. So so there's that little quote from the Compendium of Trainings, which is by the Shiksha Samuchayas, that's Shantideva. So we looked at that, so that's okay then. So towards the bottom there, it says with regard to the meditations, with regard to the meditations that according to the statement, we'll have to read that. I think this is about that quote from the Compendium of Training. So what does it say there? Thus you should meditate continuously on all kinds of giving away, guarding, purifying, and increasing your body's possessions and merit. Yeah, actually, I think I mentioned, so where it says all kinds of, what it means is as appropriate. So in other words, when it's the right time to give your body away, actually giving parts of your body, then you do that. So that means when you're able to, and when there is a call for it, was actually, it wouldn't be just a waste. Until then, you shouldn't. You should take care of it, and so it talks about guarding it, taking care of it, purifying. In the case of the body, so it talks about body possessions and merit. So it's similar thing. Purifying, increasing. Anyway, I can't remember, but although it mentions it here, that doesn't seem to be the main point. So with regard to the meditations that according to the statement should be done on the basis of the three, so the three of the body possessions and roots of virtue. Roots of virtue just means virtue. And let's see. So the reason it's why they say roots of virtue or virtuous roots is simply because virtue is the root of happiness. So it's the virtue which is the root. Not like there are some. Okay, I guess there could be virtuous roots and non-virtuous roots, but anyway, that's the main point. So what it's saying is, what Lama Tsongkhapa is explaining this as meaning is that So you got those two: your body possessions and the roots of virtue, or your merit. In connection with all the four activities: giving away, guarding, purifying, and increasing. There are both kinds: analytical meditation, which is practiced by analyzing with the wisdom of fine investigation, or the wisdom of fine analysis. Fine investigation, maybe even. Anyway, and placement meditation. So remember, in Geshe Zopa's books, they use the word stabilization. Here it says placement. That's quite a common way of translating it. And then what's the other one? I think there was another one now. I can't remember what it was. But, they use these different terms. Stabilization, placement. Oh, yeah. One-pointed meditation, when you're trying to be one-pointed. Which is actually, if you think about it, that's a term we're used to. But if you were to just say that to anybody, that's never heard before about Buddhism, what would they think you mean by a one-pointed mind? Probably would mean, they might guess that it means some sort of like being determined, to do something one-pointed. But of course, that's not what we mean. One-pointed means like being able to put your mind on one object without being distracted here, there, and everywhere, in which the mind is placed single-pointedly without analysis. Okay, so this is the whole thing that he's doing here is that, as I mentioned before, in the past, from his perspective, or maybe even at the time, during his days, there were people that were saying there's one kind of meditation, and analysis is not meditation. There's just one kind of meditation, which is just making your mind one-pointed. Now, what kind of path is? Let's see. Yeah, okay. What kind of path is analytical meditation? What kind of path is placement meditation? For meditation such as the cultivation of faith in the spiritual teacher, the preciousness of the freedoms and endowments, so that's talking about the precious human rebirth, and how difficult it is to find them, death and impermanence, actions and their effects, so karma and its results, the faults of psychic existence, suffering nature of psychic existence, and the cultivation of bodhicitta, analytical meditation is necessary. Because each of them requires an awareness that has great strength and ability to subdue the mind for a long time. Because if those are absent, their counterparts, disrespect and like cannot be prevented. This is quite interesting, really. So one thing it's saying is, why do you need analytical meditation? So why do you need analytical meditation for those topics? Because each of them requires an awareness that has great strength and the ability to subdue the mind for a long time. So it's like saying that's what analytical meditation does. Gives you it brings up an awareness that has great strength and which can subdue, just leave it like that, subdue the mind for a long time. So that's interesting. Why would you think that you need analytic meditation? I don't know about you, but I'd have probably thought, does anybody have an answer? You look like you have an answer, Sandy.
Just to familiarize yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, I would have said something like that. I might have said, in order to understand. It's similar, isn't it? Familiarize yourself. To familiarize yourself in the sense of like, becoming familiar, becoming, getting it, feeling at home with the topic.
At the forefront of your mind all the time, also.
Yeah, it's quite interesting, really. So it's interesting. What's interesting is that you do get this. It seems like historically it was the case that there were these people that said that to be and we're going to come across that, further down this section. There were people that thought that if you want to be a scholar, then you need analytic meditation. you don't need the placement meditation. If you're going to be a meditator, you need the placement meditation, you don't need the analytic meditation. And yet, it seems what you want to do is make somehow you know that you have some sort of certain habitual ways of thinking that are kind of quite destructive. They're not very nice, it's like you got them, they're there, you have the habit, but you also recognize that they're harming you in some way. And so you want to change your way of thinking, change your attitudes, so that you're naturally going to have some more positive way of reacting to things. And that's really comes through understanding, and that understanding comes through the analytic meditation. You could almost begin to wonder, well, why do I need the placement meditation? What does that do? Because the analysis brings the understanding, and when I understand, I change. Why do I need to just suddenly stop thinking? Because that's what you're doing when you're doing the placement meditation, isn't it? You stop thinking. And I think the point is, actually, it's like, so it's almost like, yes, the change in the change in the understanding comes through the analytic meditation, but if it's not followed up with the placement meditation, it could be a little bit fleeting. And it's like the placement meditation, stabilization meditation, 1 point meditation. It's almost like the understanding is on the surface, and to make that go deeper, you do, in other words, you do your analytic meditation, let's say, and you see something changes. You got some kind of feeling, that some sort of insight, if you want to call it an insight or feeling, or somehow something like you're meditating on compassion. You know what you're supposed to be doing. You've got the meditations to do, the steps to go through, and so on. You don't actually at the moment feel compassionate. Like the suffering of others is unbearable and so on. But at a certain point, something happens. It's like, it's not magic really. It's a natural result of doing the analysis and really thinking about it, giving yourself space and all that. Something changes, and for a while you want to just stay with that. I think maybe if at that point, when you felt some sort of like shift, if you were to keep analyzing, you might lose it actually. So actually what you really do want to do is it's not like grasping and holding on like that, but it's just like you've got yourself into a good space, and so you want to just stay there for a while. Stay there for a while. Anyway, I don't know. So I think that's why it is that even though it might seem that the analytic meditation is the all important one, and it is extremely important, but that's why it needs to be combined also with the placement meditation. They talk about alternating the two. So the thing is that the idea is that when you do the placement meditation, it can be that you lose the it kind of, it sort of, I don't know, it weakens or something, so you're in that space, and then it's sort of like it begins to fade. That's the word I was looking for. It begins to fade a bit. Then you need to do the analytic meditation to kind of like bring it back in a way, or like that anyway. So okay, now I don't know where I got to. Now what kind of, okay, so let's see, ability to, so let's look at that again anyway. For those meditations, okay, so faith in the spiritual teacher and so on down to bodhicitta, analytical meditation is necessary. He doesn't put a because there, but when you look at the Tibetan, it looks like there should be a because is necessary, because each of those meditations, meditating on the faith in the spiritual teacher, preciousness of freedom and doubt, so on, they require an awareness, so a mind that has great strength. Now the thing is, why would it need great strength is because what it says, their counterparts, disrespect and the like, so the opposites of those meditations are quite strong. So in order to be able to counteract them, you need a positive mind, which is really quite strong, and ability to subdue the mind for a long time. Well, it kind of makes sense. I don't pretend to have completely understood this, what he's getting at here, but it does make sense. You would want to be able to. It's something you would want, to be able to do for a long time, not just a very short moment. Yeah, and I looked at the commentaries, didn't really explain much, but that's the point anyway. I think that we got there anyway. That the analysis changes your way of thinking, and then the placement meditation is to sort of like bring it down deeper. Yeah, so because if those are absent, their counterparts, disrespect and the like, cannot be prevented. The habits are too strong. Also, the generation of such an awareness depends on nothing but the meditation repeatedly analyzing through fine investigation. So that kind of awareness, which has great strength and the ability to subdue the mind for a long time, that comes precisely from the analytic meditation. For example, so this is very useful. What the example that he's given, the analogy maybe that he's giving here, very useful. Anyway, let's read through it. For example, just as intense attachment arises when you closely familiarize yourself with an object of attachment, exaggerating its pleasant features, so intense hatred arises when you repeatedly think of the many unpleasant features of an enemy. So this is showing us how meditation works, through showing how attachment and anger, which we're very familiar with, how they work. And it is true, and it's actually quite funny in a way, but it's like, so it's it could be an object, it could be a person, like you just, in the beginning there's a little bit of attachment, but then you keep going over, like this person, they look so good from in front, they look so good from behind, they're very interesting to talk to, they dress very well, that kind of. Also, you think of all sorts of reasons why they're good, and then the attachment becomes stronger. So you're using this kind of analysis in a way to increase the strength of your attachment. And in a similar way, and likewise with the enemy, person who's harmed you, maybe they just sort of looked at you in a way that you didn't really like, and then you sort of like build it up in your mind. Yeah, they did this, and then they did that, and they did that, and then you've got a really strong case for really hating them. The hatred can become quite strong. So and that's how meditation works. You get a little bit of a feeling, then you do more and more analysis, and it becomes stronger. The experience becomes stronger. Okay, so anyway, so just like those two cases, so in the case of cultivating these paths, no matter whether the image of the object appears clearly or not, the mind's way of apprehending it must be intense and long-lasting. So whether the object is appearing clearly to you or not, the mind's the way that the mind is apprehending the object should be intense and long lasting. In other words, you don't want it to just last a few seconds, but you want to be able to meditate for minutes, even hours, maybe. And this is something that for that you need the analytic meditation. And in the context of practicing shamatha, one-pointed concentration, so anyway, calm abiding, which enables you to place your mind on whatever object you wish. Someone whose mind has been unable to stay on one object will not be able to generate shamatha if they keep analyzing, and placement meditation is required for that. What? So in the case of cultivating these paths, no matter whether the images... okay, so you need an analytic meditation. Okay. In the context of practicing shamatha, which enables you to place the mind on whatever you wish, basically for as long as you want, someone whose mind has been unable to stay on one object will not be able to generate shamatha if they keep analyzing, and placement meditation is required for that. Well, all this seems to be saying is, in contrast with those other meditations, like the faith in the Guru and so on, when you're trying to really emphasize cultivating one-pointedness, one-pointed concentration, then you shouldn't analyze. Is that what it's saying? In the context of practicing shamatha, which enables you to place the mind on whatever object you wish, someone whose mind has been unable to stay on one object will not be able to generate shamatha if they keep analyzing. So the analysis is an obstacle in that case, but not in general. And so that then he's got a few more points he wants to make. I think we can get to the end of this evening. Yeah, that'd be good. So then the idea that all thought, so here we're still on page 55, right? The notion that all thought involves apprehending signs and therefore creates obstacles to enlightenment has the fault of not differentiating between improper mental attention, apprehending true existence, and proper mental attention, thinking of reality. So what this is saying, before Lama Tsongkhapa's time, and maybe even possibly during his time, there were people who thought that basically any conceptual mind is going to be a mind grasping at true existence. So what do you call it? Apprehending signs, grasping signs. It's another way of saying grasping at true existence or grasping at self-existence. And so, of course, I mean, we're very well aware that that would be something that eventually you're trying to overcome, because that's the root cause of psychic existence. So, in other words, all conceptual minds are true grasping. Therefore, you should stop all of them. Any conceptual mind, stop. Don't do it. So whenever for us, I mean, they talk about the Buddha's thinking, and so the question comes at how can they think if they don't have conceptual mind, because they don't have conceptual mind. But in any case, for us, whenever we think, we're using conceptual mind. So these people are saying, therefore, when you meditate, you shouldn't think, because if you think, immediately you've got the true grasping, and that's bad. So the idea that you must the notion that all thought involves true grasping and therefore creates obstacles to enlightenment. If all thought were, if every thought were an instance of grasping at true existence, it would be an obstacle. They would all be obstacles to enlightenment. But that's actually not the case. It has the fault of not differentiating between improper mental attention, apprehending to existence. Usually improper mental attention is like when you're, roughly speaking, improper mental attention is anyway, sort of like some kind of unrealistic way of looking at a thing. So obviously, in the case of grasping at true existence, there's nothing which is truly existent. Therefore, that would be improper mental attention. So anyway, I think you can probably see the point here is that the idea that all thought and all conceptual minds are obstacles and to be avoided is a mistake, because there are some conceptual minds which are destructive. Ultimately, they're destructive, but there are also other ones that are not. Like, for example, compassion, bodhicitta. Practically any meditation that we do, and in any of the analytic meditations that we do, are conceptual minds, right? But they're very helpful, because you don't start, at an enlightened. When you're an enlightened being, all of your minds are non-conceptual. So you have compassion, which is non-conceptual, bodhicitta, which is non-conceptual, and so on. But it doesn't start like that. It starts off conceptual, right? That's what this is saying. That's all that this is saying, anyway. That paragraph. Then the idea that you must achieve a non-conceptual concentration that allows you to place the mind on a single object as you wish, and that if you do a lot of analytical meditation beforehand, it will prevent the arising of concentration, is contrary to the present instructions. So there's one thing here which is a little bit the way that he's dealt with this. He says non-conceptual concentration. I mean, that's a bit sort of almost misleading. The thing is, you see, normally when we say non-conceptual, it means that it's a direct perception. But there's another kind of thing which, when you're cultivating calm abiding, then they talk about, in some translations, they call it something like discursive thought, or maybe conceptualization. Discursive thought. So what it means is, you're trying to cultivate one pointedness, and it might be a conceptual mind, but you're not conceptualizing in the sense of thinking about it. Because that would be, something more sort of like analytical. So in other words, even though it's a conceptual mind, you don't want conceptualization in that sense, in the sense of thinking about things, thinking about even your object of meditation. That's not what you're doing. You've understood the object from before, and you place your mind on that without being distracted. So that's what this is talking about. The idea that you must achieve a non-conceptual concentration. In other words, thinking without any kind of conceptualization at all, but that not necessarily being a direct perception, that allows you to place the mind on a single object as you wish, and that if you do a lot of analytical meditation beforehand, it will prevent the arising of concentration, contrary to the present instructions. So what Lama Tsongkhapa seems to be arguing against is the idea that, if you want to develop calm abiding, you shouldn't do any analytic meditation at all, not just during the session where you're trying to make your mind one pointed, but in general. It's something that you shouldn't have. You just don't do that at all. What I mean is, if you look at the instructions on how to cultivate calm abiding, there are various obstacles that can arise in the meditation. And there are, for example, your mind might become depressed, not in the sense of like, oh, so and so is feeling depressed, but it can sort of like you need the kind of one pointedness that you're trying to cultivate is something very alert and very full of energy, but not too much energy. So it's like this careful balance, because if your mind becomes too sort of like it risks kind of like just you risk going off the object. So it needs to have this kind of like strong and deep energy to the meditation. So if the mind becomes too high, they talk about the mind becoming too high, too low. If it becomes too high, then you need a meditation that will dampen that, bring it back to the right level again. And likewise, if your mind goes down too much, then you need something to lift it. So, for example, if you need to bring the mind down, how you bring it down would be like meditating on death, suffering of the lower realms, and psychic existence, and so on. So that depresses the mind in general. I mean, that's the nature of those meditations. Sort of brings the mind down a bit, and that's what you want at that point. And if your mind has gone down, then you need to bring it up with, for example, thinking about the benefits of concentration, the benefits of bodhicitta, of compassion, and so on. Something nice that's going to bring the mind up. So you need to have done those meditations so that they are like your tools. It's like part of your toolkit kind of thing. So it would be wrong to say that you shouldn't do that kind of meditation prior to trying to cultivate calm abiding. That's what Lama Tsongkhapa is saying. So he says, so it's contrary to the present instructions. For example, he gives this analogy, and then he goes through that, and then he shows us that actually the analogy comes from Arya Sangha. And I don't think I'm going to be able to say much about this, but I think it helps to make it clearer. For example, a skillful goldsmith burns gold. I mean, these in some ways for us it's not very good. Well, me anyway, it's not such an amazing analogy because I got no idea about how a goldsmith, prepares the gold or silver that they're going to use for making into jewelry or whatever. But anyway, let's see. So, for example, a skillful goldsmith burns gold or silver in the fire and washes it in water again and again, removing all the impurities and making it very pliant. Okay, well, that makes sense. I mean, actually, it doesn't make sense, but if that's what you're supposed to do, then okay. So that it can be made into, once it's pliant, then it can be made into whatever jewelry one wishes, such as earrings. Likewise, at first you meditate on the afflictions. That's actually not at all a Tibetan idea. They would never talk about meditating on attachment. The only way that you could understand that idea, meditating on attachment, would be if you're trying to increase your attachment. But anyway, it seems to be okay in English, doesn't it, I suppose? Likewise, at first you meditate on the afflictions, the secondary afflictions, non-virtuous actions and their effects in the case of bad conduct, and the faults of cyclic existence in the order in which they are presented. By meditating with analytical wisdom on such faults again and again, you become completely downhearted or mentally dejected. So it's the point, obviously, isn't that you do those meditations because you want to be downhearted or mentally dejected, but because it can, because as I was saying just now, sometimes you need to bring the mind down a bit. Like burning gold in fire, whereby you turn away from the non-virtuous side and clear away those defilements. Next, you meditate on the excellent qualities of the spiritual friend, the preciousness of the freedoms and endowments, the excellent qualities of the three jewels. virtuous actions and their effects, the benefits of bodhicitta, and so on, in the order in which they are presented. By meditating with the wisdom of fine investigation on such excellent qualities again and again, your mind becomes drenched with them. So in other translations, it says moistened by them. I don't know about drenched, moistened by. It's quite a big difference, isn't it? I don't know if you would have a feeling of being drenched, would you? But then what does it mean to say that your mind becomes moistened? I think maybe the idea is that instead of being dry, being moistened, and you develop clarifying faith, like washing gold with water. Still can't really see the connection, to be honest. I'm sorry. Whereby you turn towards the virtuous side and take delight in it. Thus, the mind is saturated with virtuous qualities. When it has been transformed in that way, whether you wish to achieve shamatha or special insight, vipassana, you will achieve it without difficulty when your mind is focused on it. That is why such analytical meditation is the best means of achieving a non-conceptual concentration, non-conceptualizing, non-discursive concentration. So he does seem to be simply making the point that when you've done those analytical meditations, then that will help you to bring the mind up or make it go down when you need it. And this is how Arya Asanga also put it. What's Arya Asanga famous for? He's the one that was meditating on compassion, meditating on Maitreya, and couldn't get to see Maitreya through his meditation after many years, and then eventually, because of generating great compassion, he was able to see him. Remember the one about the dog? Yeah. For example, when a smith or his skillful apprentice burns gold or silver in a fire and washes it with water a couple of times in order to remove all impurities and stains, it becomes pliant and malleable for fashioning this or that ornament. Their method is clearly evident. So those with the appropriate mastery of a skillful smith or apprentice can then fashion whatever ornament they wish using a smith's tools. Likewise, a yogi, meditator, ensures that his or her mind, is not turned towards impurities and stains such as covetousness, and cultivates disenchantment, delighting his mind by focusing not on the stresses, I don't know where that came from, anyway, the unhappiness that is caused by the afflicted mind, but on the virtuous side instead. That meditator doubtlessly, no, that's right, yeah, I couldn't work out where he got that from anyway, but let's suppose it's right. That meditator doubtlessly trains the mind in either the side of shamatha or the side of a special insight, such that either it is closely applied to this and that, or is resting in its natural state, unmoving and unwavering. It can also be directed for the sake of perfectly achieving whatever purpose he has contemplated. I seem to have missed something. Let's have a look. It's contemplated. Furthermore, the main hindrance to the mind abiding on an object continuously is twofold: laxity and excitement. So laxity, sometimes they call it sinking in excitement, sinking in excitation, laxity in the excitation, mental excitation. Sometimes they say. Lama Zopa prefers distraction to objects of attachment. So those are, basically, anyway, laxity bringing the mind down, so that even though your mind is remaining on the object, it's sort of like, it's like falling asleep kind of thing. It's not the same as falling asleep, but if you have a strong and constant awareness that sees the excellent qualities of the three jewels and so forth, it's quite easy to overcome laxity. For many valid sources say that its antidote is to uplift the mind by looking at excellent qualities. If you have a strong and constant awareness that sees the faults of impermanence, suffering, and so forth, it is quite easy to overcome excitement. For excitement is a distracted mind belonging to the category of attachment. And many texts praise disenchantment as its antidote, something that brings the mind down. But I'm sure I missed something. I think I missed a section. Yes, I did. I thought I had. So page 55. See, I know. I think I jumped to this one where it says the notion that all thought involves apprehending science. The paragraph before that, I skipped that one. Yeah. So this here he's dealing with the mistaken idea that yes, there are these two different types of meditation, but one person doesn't need both of them. So sorry, this is like in the middle of the page, page 55. So it says, some who do not understand this approach may claim that if you are a scholar, you should only do analytic meditation, while if you're a sadhu, you should only do placement meditation. It's funny he uses the word sadhu here. He must, because it's a Sanskrit word, right? So he's actually, the Tibetan is kusali, which is also Sanskrit. So they, it's a Sanskrit word that they borrowed. And for some reason, the translator must have thought that the Sanskrit word sadhu would be more familiar to English speakers than kusali. He might be right. But anyway, so kusali is what it says in Tibetan. And kusali is a kind of practitioner, one who is sort of seems very ordinary, but actually has a very deep practice. So actually, and it can even be to an extreme, like in the case of Shantideva. So everybody knows the story of Shantideva, right? Who was at Nalanda Monastery and known as being well, I don't know if they called him a kusali. I don't think they recognized. Some of them did, but anyway. But eating, sleeping, and going to the toilet, not doing anything apart from that. But anyway, so that's a kusali practitioner. So sadhu, and what does that mean usually? They talk about the sadhus in India. It's the people that give up the worldly life and they wander around, so they're mendicants and maybe they beg food probably, and supposedly, the idea is that they spend their time meditating. So anyway, it's somebody who practices on the surface, they practice and they meditate, but they don't study. They don't do the kind of formal stuff. They just look very ordinary. So that's what. Well, if you're a sadhu, you should only do placement meditation, no analysis, no checking at all. But this is not correct because each of them needs to do both. Scholars also need to achieve shamatha, and sadhus, kusali, they also need to achieve strong faith in the spiritual teacher and the like through their analysis. So why is that? Why does a scholar need shamatha? Why do they need one-pointed concentration? Any ideas?
For the wisdom of emptiness, right? Is that what you...
Well, wouldn't they be able to understand emptiness mainly through analysis?
Well, isn't that why we do one-pointed concentration, to develop wisdom of emptiness?
Well, once you've got the understanding of emptiness, then you would need the concentration to take that understanding further. That's for sure. So, for example, in terms of the 5 paths, at the beginning of the path, you're If you haven't realized emptiness, then there you would, but then you need to combine that with the calm abiding. So within the calm abiding, you analyze the meaning of emptiness, and when you're able to develop the vipassana special insight, then that's when you move on to the next part, the path of preparation. So yeah, but somebody who's a scholar though, I think maybe Lama Tsongkhapa is assuming that well, nobody's going to just be a scholar and be satisfied with just intellectual knowledge. Why would somebody be a scholar? It would be to understand and then, take that understanding into their practice. So that's where, what you're saying would be completely right, that through the analysis you understand that you understand emptiness, but then with the one pointed meditation, that's when you deepen the experience. And for sure, when you look at the five paths, then you couldn't possibly progress very far without the one pointed concentration. In other words, without shamatha. That's for sure. Yeah. So that's good. And then why the sadhu also needs to analyze? Why do they need the analysis?
For compassion.
For the compassion, for everything really. I mean, the thing is that it's like without the if you don't have the analysis, and if you think about what that means to analyze, I mean, it's like you have to really, you can only really make sense of it in the context of the listening, reflecting, and meditating. You listen to the teachings, think about it, analyze, and then bring it into the meditation. If the point being that to meditate, you have to meditate on something. And so that's got to be something that you've understood through contemplating. And you'll only get that kind of understanding, that kind of insight, if you've listened to the teachings and studied to begin with. I think what there's one analogy that you might have heard. They say that a person who meditates without having done study and listening to teachings and so on is like a person without arms trying to climb a mountain. It's just impossible. Yeah. So therefore, the idea that repeated analysis using the wisdom of fine investigation belongs to the context of study and reflection rather than to the context of practice is incorrect. So anyway, he's saying we all need both. We all need both. So that's good. And then actually still got some time. So that's good. If we start looking at this, that's right. So chapter 6, it's even possible, let's see, I think that after this, it talks about the three types of practitioner, the paths of the three types of person. Okay. So chapter 6, the freedoms and endowments of this life. Stage of training the mind once you've relied on a teacher. Okay, so yeah, in terms of so what it says right back at the beginning, it said for training the mind, then there's first of all, like training in faith and so on towards your spiritual guide, and then based on that, the various steps to go through, starting off with the precious human life. So what it says is, so it says once you have relied. I think we might have talked about this, a long time ago at the beginning of the text. It says once you have relied, which kind of almost gives you the idea. So you've got your practice in relation to the meditation zone, in relation to the guru, special, the spiritual friend. Then once that's done, once you've got that out of the way, then you're going to go on to this. But it's not like that. It's on. This is the foundation. All of that way of the way that you relate to the spiritual guide or the virtuous friend. That's the foundation. And based on that foundation, then first of all, you have exhortation to take the essence of this life endowed with freedoms, endowed with freedom, and second, the way to take its essence. So, in other words, meditating on the leisures and endowments, or meditating on the precious human rebirth, is to get to the point where you really want to do something worthwhile with your life. So that's the first thing. Then the second thing is, well, what is it that you're going to do? How are you going to do something really worthwhile with your life? So first of all, okay, an exhortation to take the essence of this life endowed with freedom. So this has got 3 points: identifying the freedoms and endowments, contemplating their great value, and contemplating the difficulty in finding them. So this is, standard. All the Lamrim teachings, they talk about it under those 3 headings. When we talk about leisures and endowments, what are they? Then thinking about the amazing things you can do if you have those leisures and endowments, and then also thinking about the difficulty in finding them. Difficulty in finding them means, you can easily get the idea, well, what I don't get done this life, I can always keep going in my next life. But actually, then you're assuming that it's kind of like automatically you're going to get an opportunity like this one after the other, which is not the case. It only happens if you make it happen. So identifying the freedoms and endowments, and this is quite amazing actually, and I hope it comes out when we're going through this, but it's like realizing, I think maybe the analogy they use is this one. It's like somebody who's extremely poor. Maybe they have a home, otherwise very poor. I mean, there's plenty of that around, isn't there? And they realize one day that actually, under the foundation, under the house, there's this incredible diamond, or of course, probably according to the law, you wouldn't be able to keep it. I wouldn't be surprised. But anyway, you get the idea. Finding actually, so you're very, very poor and life is very, very difficult, but somehow, I don't know, maybe you manage to find $1 to pay for a lottery ticket, and then you win, I don't know, like $50 million. Is that good? I think that's pretty good, isn't it? 50 million? Yeah. Okay. So, wow, now look what I can do. It's just so amazing. Now I have this, I can do this, and I can do this, and I can do this. And it often doesn't work out very well, but so it's like that, it's almost like until you realize that you have this incredible opportunity, till you recognize that, it's like you're the poorest person in the world that's actually got this incredible treasure, just buried out in the back garden or something, So you just have to dig there and you'll find that you've got it, Yeah. So it's like everybody in the whole world is just so rich without realizing it. It's amazing, really. So that's what that is about. So identifying them and then thinking about the amazing things you can do once you've got it, and then, reminding yourself that actually it's not going to last forever. So really, you see, what you're going to find what I hope we're going to find as we're going through this. The next thing after this is meditating on death, and they're taught separately, but they overlap a little bit, because really, it's like you think about these leisures and endowments, and you think about how amazing the amazing things you can do with it. Then you have to meditate on death, the fact that you have to die eventually. So in other words, this opportunity is going to come to an end. It actually could come to an end any time, and you can't assume that automatically after this life you're going to go on to another similar kind of opportunity, maybe something even better, because it's difficult to get such a life in the future. It's almost like everything, you have to do everything in this life, because if you don't more or less assume you're not going to get the opportunity ever again, if you don't assume that, then you easily become complacent, and you start thinking, just carry on next life where I left off this life. Yeah, well, we'll see about that. So maybe we can stop there. So let's dedicate all the merit created between us this evening, and also that we ever have created, ever will create, also not just ourselves but all others, and dedicating all of that. The main thing is towards the lasting, pure happiness and peace of mind for all beings, to be able to achieve enlightenment, so that we will be able to make that happen. For the long life of our holy gurus like His Holiness Dalai Lama, his long life, and for all of his projects and plans and prayers and wishes to really happen. His Holiness and Lama Rinpoche are all of our guides in this world, and for the success of the FPMT, and especially of Learner Medicine Buddha. So when we think I, the one who's dedicating, there seems to be an I that exists completely independently of anything. That's how it seems. But there's no such thing. We exist, but not the way we appear, and just like that, also the dedication, what we've dedicated. Whatever we turn our mind to, it always seems to be something that's not a mere imputation by the conceptual mind. So everything is completely empty of existing in the way that it appears because of that. Okay. See you next week.